Happy coding.
Hey there, Kevin here, and welcome to our next video in our series on web development. So we have learned a lot. I keep saying that because it keeps being true, but over the last few weeks we've gotten really into JavaScript and the different things you can do that, from having functions that are called from your HTML, and last week we learned about if statements, which let you make decisions in your code. So this week we are going to continue expanding on our JavaScript knowledge, and we're going to learn a bunch of stuff, all like boom, boom, boom. And it's all sort of in the theme of data and how you process data in different formats and whatnot. So to start that out, in this video, we are going to cover a new concept called a for loop. And that lets you sort of repeat work in your code and saves you a bunch of lines of code, because you can do like patterns and repeated work in just a few lines of code. So I'm just going to dive in. As always, the best way I know how to do that is not through like a bunch of slides, but it's by diving right into the code. So I'm going to do that. I have my Scratch file here in NeoCities, and right now it just contains some foundational CSS and a single load function that gets an element with an ID of output and then adds hello world as the inner text. And then in the HTML itself, it only has a single element with an ID of output put in a container. So if I open that up, then it looks like this. So, nothing too shocking here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to rearrange my windows a bit so that the editor is on the left and my page is on the right, so I can kind of quickly switch back and forth between them. And just have, something to look at while we chat. Okay, so I have that, and let me just really quickly do this. And I do kind of just recommend this approach if you're coding, whether you have an IDE or whatnot. I will usually have a couple monitors, and that's how I do it. But I'm a professional web developer or computer scientist, so I like multiple windows or multiple screens or monitors. But I'm not going to say you have to go get one. But this is fine for now. Okay, so I have my code here, and just to make sure this is connected, I'll say hello again, world, and I'll save that and refresh, and I see that over here. Okay, cool. So that is connected. All right, so I'm going to maybe start with just a little bit of review and go from there. So let's say I wanted to use an if statement. So I'll say something like, it's too small. Sure. Let current hour equals, I don't know, it's pretty late actually right now, so I'll say, I don't know, 19 is 7 p.m. And then I can have something called an if statement, which we learned about last week, which says something like if current hour is less than, I'll say noon, then I will steal this line of code. And instead of saying hello world, I will say good morning. Good morning. And otherwise, or else, I will say document dot get element by ID output dot inner text equals good night. Good night. And since 7 p.m. is indeed after 12, I would expect this to say good night if I refresh. And it does. And if I change this to something like 7 a.m., I would expect it to say good morning. And it does. Cool. And I'm reviewing this because this idea of adding lines of code that control what your code does is very important. This is called control flow, to be pedantic and technical about it, but really it just means your code runs line by line and does stuff. So in this case, when I read the code line by line, I say inside the load function, first I create a variable, current hour, I set it to 7. Then I just read line by line. I get down here and I say if the current hour is less than 12, it is. Then I run this line of code. And there's different rules about which lines of code get run in what order. And in this case, the if statement says, since I ran this line of code, then I won't run this line of code. And I could switch it around and go the other way. And then the code would keep going. If I have more code down here, then, it keeps going, keeps going. So that's kind of the idea of control flow. I can control the flow of my code by adding different lines of code that make decisions or do different stuff. So just kind of keep that in mind. That code runs line by line, and we will come back to that in just a couple minutes. But before we do that, I'm going to sort of walk you through the reason that for loops become handy, and then I'll get back into for loops. So I'm going to change a couple things. Again, this is just my Scratch file, so changing stuff is fine. That's kind of why this file exists. But let's say instead of my output being an H1, let's say I'm just going to get rid of this ID for now, and I'm going to say, like, I don't know, this is just like hello world. And let's say I wanted to have, I don't know, like a UL with a, maybe that's my output. And I'll say ID equals output. And I want to fill this with some LIs, let's just say, for the sake of the example. So I'm going to get rid of this. I'm going to maybe steal this line of code because I'll need it in a second. And I am going to say something like, actually, maybe I won't completely steal it. I'll get this in a variable. I'll say let output element equals document.get element by ID output. And then I'll say something like output element. I'm going to say plus equals because that's going to come in handy. This should look a little familiar from the last couple weeks where this is incrementing a variable, or in this case, it's appending a string to the existing variable. So by default, it's, actually I need the inner text, .inner text plus equals, which means I'm going to add to the text, which starts out as empty, but I want to add like, maybe like li1 / li, sure. And then I'll do a couple things. Maybe I will paste, 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. And this should work because what I'm doing is I'm saying, here's a element. It's just a UL. It's empty by default. And I want to get that element in my JavaScript. And then I want to take its inner text and add li1 to it. Then take its inner text, which is now li1, and add li2 to it. So then I take its inner text, which is now li1, li2, add li3 to it, and then finally take its inner text, which is now li1, li2, li3, and add li4 for it to it. And the end result should be, drum roll, if I refresh over here, I now see, okay, well, sure. I see hello world, and I see li1, li2, li3, li4. Sure. That's not exactly what I wanted, and that gets at, well, first off, the general idea of having to debug code, which I've shown you many, many times because it's a normal part of coding, but I didn't really expect the text to be in there. I expected this to be HTML, and in this case, it's because this is inner text, and I meant inner HTML. So let's change it to that. Inner HTML. I always forget if it's capitalized or not because different functions choose different conventions, which is kind of tricky, but let's just try this and see what happens. Refresh. And okay, cool. Now I see 1, 2, 3, 4. Cool. And this works. It's not like a ton better than just having it in the HTML, but it's for the sake of, I don't know, the example here. I have JavaScript that adds 1, 2, 3, 4 to my UL output, and it works. However, it's kind of annoying because I don't know. Let's say that I wanted to, I don't know, wrap all of these in a strong tag, or add like a CSS class, for example. So maybe I'll do that. Actually, I'll say class equals, and in here I'll say, I don't know, like, I'm trying to think of a color that will work with pink. Maybe I'll not use a color. Maybe I'll say border. So I'll say like class equals, I'll just say special for now, okay? Doesn't really matter. So then I'll style this special and I'll give it a border or something. Border equals 1 pixels solid and black. For now, it doesn't really matter what it actually does. So if I refresh, I don't see that. Why not? Class equals special. Here we go. Let's go inspect and see what it's doing. Class does equal special dot special. Border equals. Let's just try another refresh. Actually, that doesn't make sense. It should be 1 pixel solid black. Let's just try another refresh. Why not? Maybe you can't give ALI a border? No, it should still show up. All right, I need to make this a little bigger. Yeah, inline 13. What the heck? Let's see what's in here. What's in here? Interesting. And okay, I think I see it now. Again, debugging, totally normal part of code. In this case, I was like staring at this for a second. I was like, wait, 1 pixel solid black, that looks right. And then I was looking up here, and sure enough, I added an equal sign. So this, of course, needs to be a colon, and all of this is sort of outside the point of what I'm trying to show you, but it's a normal part of coding, so, you know, maybe it's a good thing to show. But now if I refresh, I do indeed see the border. But my point is that now if I want to change this, let's say I wanted to add this to all of them, it gets kind of annoying because now I have to copy paste, copy paste, copy paste, and imagine if there were, I don't know, like 100 of these. That would get pretty annoying. And you have probably encountered that before, where you have like a bunch of repeated code that you make a change in one place and now you have to make a change in like 10 places. And this just gets a little unwieldy. But anyway, let's see. So if I refresh this, does it actually work? And indeed it does. Okay, and I could add other things like margins and paddings, but it's not really the main point. Okay, so we've sort of convinced ourselves that this works, but it's kind of annoying. So let's do it a different way. And for now, I'll just move it down, I think. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to introduce a new piece of syntax, a new feature in JavaScript, and that is called a for loop. And it's new syntax, so I'll sort of go pretty slow, and I will say, I'll just type it out. So I'm going to use a for loop, which is going to help me repeat a piece of code. It's similar to an if statement, in that a if statement either like does something or it doesn't. A for loop does something a certain number of times. So I'm going to type that out by saying for, and then I'm going to give myself an open parenthesis. And in here, I'm going to give it 3 things. The first thing I'm going to do is create a variable. So I'm going to say let index equals 0. It usually starts at 0. We'll talk about other options in a second, but for now, I'll start it at 0. And then I'm going to have a semicolon. And then I am going to have a inequality or like a check that basically checks whether I should continue repeating the code. And in this case, I'll say something like index is less than 10, and then another semicolon. And then finally, it has a incrementer. So I'll say, in this case, index plus plus. So the index plus plus, I could write that as index equals index plus 1. But like we talked about last week, this is a little shortcut for it. And then I will close out my parenthesis, and then I will have a opening curly brace, and then I'll give myself some white space, and then I'll close out my my curly brace. So it's kind of a lot of syntax, but it's a for, and then a open and closing parenthesis, and inside of those parentheses, it's three things: a variable, like a creation of a variable, and then a inequality, and then an incrementer. And then inside of this piece of code, I write, well, more code. So for now, I'll just paste that in. So I'll delete this. And so what am I doing in here? I have a for loop that we haven't really talked about what it does yet, but it has these three things in it. And then inside of the for loop, I say output element dot inner HTML plus equals, and then it's this li with a 1 in it. So let's just see what that does. If I refresh, I get 4. Why? Let's try another refresh. Cache clearing. Maybe I didn't save it. Oh, I didn't save it. Saving helps usually. So if I refresh now, all right, there we go. And what I see is I have a bunch of 1s in here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. I have 10 1s in my output here, and that's because I always am outputting 1 here. So instead of this 1, what I want to do is use the string concatenation or appending to output what? I want to output the index. So if I do that, maybe I will add, maybe I'll add some white space here. So I'll say like plus equals and then just a whole new line, and sure, that works. JavaScript doesn't really care about white space, so I'm just putting this all on one line so it fits a little better on the screen. But now I'm saying inside of my for loop, I am saying output element dot inner HTML plus equals this whole string, which is li with a class of special plus index plus a closing li. And now if I refresh, now I see 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. So this will sort of help us talk through like what this for loop is doing. And to do that, maybe I'll introduce a little bit more white space. And this is usually not what you'll do, but JavaScript does not care, so you can do it this way. I'm only going to do it this way because it gets like a little easier to talk about if it's formatted this way, but this is usually not how you would format a for loop, but it's fine. So what I have is the same code. If I save this and refresh, nothing should change. Cool. But now what I can do is kind of look through each section kind of more carefully. So starting at the top, I get my output element, and then I get to this for loop. And what a for loop does is the very first time you get to it, it runs this line of code. So it creates a variable called index, and that's just a thing. It has a variable called index now. And then it runs this line of code. And it checks, it asks, is index less than 10? And in this case, 0 is less than 10. So the answer is yes. And in that case, it kind of functions like a for loop. And so it says, okay, cool, then I will run this line of code. And it runs this line of code where it says output element dot inner HTML plus equals the li with index in it. Index is still 0. So it outputs this to the page. And then it reaches this sort of closing curly brace. And remember with an if statement that when you reach the end of the curly brace, it would jump down to the bottom of the if structure, if else and else. And in a for loop, it actually jumps back to the top. And it gets here, and the subsequent times that it reaches the for loop, the first thing it does is actually this third thing. So index was 0. It runs index plus plus. So now index is 1. And it skips this because that was already created. And it asks this question again. Is index less than 10? Well, 1 is less than 10. So sure. So it enters this line of code and runs that. And now index is 1. And it outputs this 1. It jumps down here, jumps back to the top and runs index plus plus. Now index is 2. 2 is less than 10, runs this line of code, you get the 2. And then eventually you're down here, and let's say we are at 8. It outputs the 8, jumps to the top, says index plus plus, index is 9, asks is 9 less than 10? Yes, it is. Outputs this, which outputs this 9. Okay, so we're at 9. We've just outputted the 9. Gets to the closing curly brace, jumps up to the top, runs index plus plus. So now index is 10. And is 10 less than 10? No, 10 is equal to 10. And so this now acts more like an if statement, and it says, wait, this is false. Let's get out of here. And it jumps down to the bottom and then keeps going down here. So if I had more code, it would keep running. Okay, so that is for loops in a nutshell. And so I'm going to maybe return this syntax to what I would normally expect. And there's a few things here that I want to maybe point out. Like I'm following what I would consider like, I don't know, like the standard sort of index and incrementing format. Like it starts at 0 and increases by 1. You can try other things. So in this case, let's say I wanted to go from 1 to 10, like in my output. There's a few ways I could do that. Like I could do some math here, like add 1 or something. But I could also do that up here. So I can say, instead of starting at 0, I'll start at 1. And instead of stopping when it's less than 10, in fact, maybe I'll just start there. And now what I see is it goes from 1 to 9. And that's because once it gets to 10, 10 is not less than 10, so it skips down. So maybe I'll say less than or equal to here. So I'll refresh. Okay, I'm at 10. And let's see. One of the, like, I don't know, the powerful things that that for loops give you is, let's say I wanted there to be, I don't know, 100 of these LIs. Well, that's easy. That now there will be 100 of these LIs. Let's refresh. And indeed, I get 100. I can make 1,000 if I type in the right window. 1,000. And I can refresh. And sure enough, now there are 1,000 down there. And I didn't have to write 1,000 lines of code. I had to change 1 0. And that's the power of for loops. I could also do, let's get that down to like 100 to be a little more reasonable. I could also change like this line of code. So maybe instead of incrementing by 1, I don't want 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Maybe I want to increase by, I don't know, 7. So I can say plus equals 7, save that, and refresh. And indeed, 1 plus 7 is 8, 8 plus 7 is 15, 15 plus 7 is 22. All the way down, we eventually get to 99. And so I'm at 99, I get down here, I go back to the for loop, I get index plus equals 7, I turn to 106, then I check this, is index less than or equal to 106, or is 106 less than or equal to 100? No, it's not, so I skip it and I sort of end at 99. So all different things you can play with, you can change all of the above. And that works. And the sort of payoff here is, remember how annoying it was to add special when there was just like 4 of them? Now there are 100 of them. And let's say I wanted to make another change. Let's say I wanted to change, like, I don't know, I wanted to add some text here and say like, we are number, and then it'll just say, you know, whatever number it is. And maybe I'll start back at 1 and go back to increasing by 1, just to make it a little more easy to read. So I'll save that and I'll refresh. And there we go. I have a little weird thing here where I didn't include a space, so I'll add a space. And look how easy that is. I'm changing it in one line of code here, and it's modifying it in 100 places in my HTML because of this for loop. Okay, so that's where I'll sort of end this one, and we will continue building on this. This by itself might not seem super useful, but the next video where we get into arrays, you'll see like why a for loop is so useful, because it lets you work with like repeated data. But for now, this is the structure of a for loop, and you can use it to do a bunch of stuff a bunch of times. In this case, we just outputted a bunch of LIs to our page, but you can put, any kind of code in here that you want. Okay, so I'll see you in the next video, and until then, happy for looping.